Welcome. But before we begin, let me ask you something that may surprise you, even shock you. What if one of the most frequently mentioned nations in the Qur'an is also one of the most misunderstood in the history of mankind? What if the story of an entire people, filled with prophets, miracles, warnings, triumphs, and painful tests, was not simply a record of the past, but a powerful message meant for every generation that would come after them? What if the rise of a nation, the honor given to them by Allah, and the repeated trials they faced were all written in divine revelation centuries before historians ever attempted to understand them? Tonight, we explore the hidden history of Bani Israel mentioned in the Qur'an, a story that does not begin with kings, empires, or military victories. It begins with faith. It begins with obedience. And it begins with one of the most remarkable families ever chosen by Allah. The roots of Bani Israel stretch back to the noble Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, a man whose story represents one of the greatest acts of devotion in human history. In a world drowning in idolatry and false gods, Ibrahim stood alone. He rejected the idols worshipped by his people and declared that there was only one true creator worthy of worship. Because of his unwavering faith, he earned a special title in Islam, Khalilullah, the friend of Allah. From this noble prophet came a blessed lineage. Among his sons was Ishaq, peace be upon him, a prophet who carried forward the legacy of monotheism. And from Ishaq came another prophet whose name would define an entire nation, Yaqub, peace be upon him. Yaqub was also known as Israel. This is where the name Bani Israel originates. The phrase literally means, the children of Israel, referring to the descendants of Prophet Yaqub. But this family was not just large, it was destined for a remarkable role in history. Yaqub, peace be upon him, had 12 sons. And from these sons emerged the 12 tribes of Bani Israel. Each tribe would grow into a large community, and over generations their descendants would become an entire nation. Among these 12 sons was a young boy, whose life would become one of the most powerful and emotionally moving stories ever told in divine revelation. That boy was Yusuf, peace be upon him. The story of Yusuf is not merely about jealousy between brothers. It is about patience in suffering. It is about trust in Allah when the world appears to turn against you. And it is about the incredible way in which Allah transforms tragedy into destiny. When Yusuf was young, his father Yaqub loved him deeply. This special affection, however, awakened jealousy in the hearts of his brothers. Their jealousy slowly turned into resentment, and their resentment eventually turned into a terrible plan. One day they took Yusuf far from home and threw him into a deep well, leaving him alone in darkness. They returned to their father with a fabricated story, claiming that a wolf had devoured him. But Allah had already planned something far greater. A caravan passing through the desert discovered Yusuf in the well and brought him to Egypt. What began as betrayal would eventually lead to honor. What began in darkness would eventually lead to power. In Egypt, Yusuf faced years of hardship. He was falsely accused of a crime he did not commit. He was imprisoned despite his innocence. But through every trial, Yusuf remained patient and faithful. And in time, Allah elevated him to one of the highest positions in the land. Through wisdom granted by Allah, Yusuf interpreted dreams that warned of a coming famine. Because of this knowledge, he helped Egypt prepare for years of drought, saving countless lives. When the famine spread across the region, people from distant lands traveled to Egypt seeking food. Among them were Yusuf's own brothers. The very men who had betrayed him now stood before him, desperate for help. Yet instead of revenge, Yusuf chose forgiveness. In one of the most emotional reunions recorded in sacred history, he revealed his identity and welcomed his family to Egypt. This moment marked the beginning of Bani Israel's settlement in Egypt. For many years, they lived there peacefully. But history does not remain still. Generations passed, kings changed, and eventually a ruler came to power who feared the growing population of Bani Israel. This ruler was known in the Qur'an simply as Pharaoh. Pharaoh saw the Israelites not as neighbors, but as a potential threat. Driven by arrogance and paranoia, he enslaved them. They were forced into hard labor, building cities and monuments under brutal conditions. Yet Pharaoh's cruelty did not stop there. Fearing that their population might one day challenge his power, he issued a horrifying decree. Every newborn boy from Bani Israel was to be killed. Only the girls were to be spared. It was an attempt to slowly erase an entire nation. But Allah's plan cannot be stopped by tyrants. During this dark time, a child was born, who would one day confront Pharaoh himself. That child was Musa, peace be upon him. Fearing for her son's life, Musa's mother received divine inspiration. Allah guided her to place the infant in a small basket and set it gently upon the river. Imagine the courage required for such an act. A mother placing her newborn child into the waters, trusting completely in the protection of Allah. The basket floated along the river until it reached the palace of Pharaoh himself, and in a twist of destiny so powerful that history still remembers it, the tyrant who sought to destroy Bani Israel unknowingly raised the very child who would one day challenge him. Musa grew up in the royal palace, surrounded by luxury and power. But he never lost the connection to his people. Years later, after leaving Egypt and spending time in the desert, Musa experienced a moment that would change history forever. Near the sacred mountain known as Mount Sinai, Allah spoke to him and chose him as a prophet. He was commanded to return to Egypt and deliver a message to Pharaoh. The message was simple, yet powerful. Worship Allah alone, end oppression, free Bani Israel. Musa returned with his brother Harun, peace be upon him, and stood before Pharaoh. But Pharaoh's arrogance only deepened. He mocked Musa and accused him of being a magician. Yet Allah supported Musa with clear miracles. His staff transformed into a living serpent. His hand shone with a radiant light. Pharaoh gathered the greatest magicians of the land to challenge Musa publicly. But when they witnessed the miracle of Allah, they immediately recognized the truth. They fell into prostration and declared their belief in the Lord of Musa. Even under threat of torture and death, they refused to deny their faith. Eventually, Allah commanded Musa to lead Bani Israel out of Egypt. What followed became one of the most dramatic events ever described in the Qur'an, the parting of the sea. As Musa and his people fled toward the shore, Pharaoh's massive army pursued them. Behind them stood soldiers in chariots. Before them stood the vast sea. Fear spread among the people, but Musa remained calm. He declared with certainty that Allah would guide them. By Allah's command, Musa struck the sea with his staff. The waters parted, forming towering walls on each side, and a dry path through the middle. Bani Israel crossed safely. Pharaoh and his army rushed in pursuit, but when the last of the believers reached the other side, the waters returned. The sea swallowed Pharaoh and his army. The ruler who once claimed to be a god was defeated by the power of the true Lord of the universe. Yet even after this miraculous rescue, the journey of Bani Israel was far from over. In the desert, Allah provided them with miraculous sustenance. Food descended from the heavens, clouds shaded them from the scorching sun, and Musa received divine commandments that would guide their society. But the Qur'an also records moments of weakness among some of them, moments of impatience, moments of doubt. These stories are not told to mock them. They are told as lessons for humanity. Because the story of Bani Israel is ultimately not about one nation alone. It is about how Allah tests communities. It is about how honor is granted through faith. And it is about how guidance must be respected when it arrives. Over the centuries, many righteous prophets arose among Bani Israel. Among them were Dawood, Suleiman, Zachariah, Yahya, and Isa, peace be upon them all. Each of them carried forward the message of worshipping Allah alone. Their stories represent generations of divine guidance sent to guide humanity. When we read the Qur'an carefully, we realize something remarkable. The story of Bani Israel is not simply a chapter of ancient history. It is a mirror reflecting the rise and fall of nations. A reminder that faith brings honor, a warning that arrogance leads to destruction, and above all, a timeless lesson that the greatest gift Allah gives to any people is not wealth, land, or power. It is guidance, and that is the profound message hidden within the history of Bani Israel mentioned in the Qur'an.